She drove an old man to the hospital as a favor, not knowing his grandson, a CEO, would come back to find her. Rain pounded the windshield like 1,000 frantic fingers, and wind howled through the mountain road's tight curves as if warning anyone daring enough to travel it. Mia tightened her grip on the steering wheel, squinting through the blur. Her old delivery van creaked with every turn, its headlights barely cutting through the thick wall of night and water. She was tired, soaked, and hungry after a long day delivering for the bakery she worked at, but she was almost home. Then she saw it, a flash of sparks, a faint glow. Her eyes widened as she rounded the bend and spotted a car flipped on its side just ahead, resting dangerously close to the guardrail. Smoke rose in a thin, eerie line into the storm-dark sky, and one of the headlights flickered feebly like the last breath of a dying firefly. Mia's heart lurched. Without a second thought, she slammed the brakes. Her tires skidded slightly, but she wrestled the van into a stop and leapt out, slamming the door behind her. Cold rain lashed her face, instantly soaking her jacket, jeans, and shoes, but she ran toward the wrecked car. "Hello?" she called out over the roar of the storm. "Can you hear me? Is anyone in there?" A soft groan answered her, muffled but real. She crouched beside the broken passenger side window and saw him, a man, elderly, slumped across the seat, blood trailing down from his forehead. His chest moved, shallow and slow. A seatbelt pinned him in place. "Oh my God," Mia breathed. "Hang on, I'm going to get you out." His eyes fluttered open slightly, dull with pain and confusion. "Don't let me die here," he rasped, barely audible through the rain and his failing strength. Mia's voice trembled but held firm. "You're not going to die, not tonight. I've got you, just trust me." The door wouldn't budge. She tried once, twice, then screamed in frustration. Scanning the ground, she found a thick metal rod, probably from the wreck itself. Using all her strength, she wedged it between the door and frame, pushing with every muscle in her body. "Nothing!" She screamed again, louder this time, then stepped back and shattered the driver's side window with the rod. Glass rained down, slicing her hand in the process, but she ignored the pain. She reached in, fumbled with the seatbelt, and after what felt like forever, it came loose. The smell of gasoline hit her at the same time she heard the faint crackle. "No!" A spark erupted beneath the crumpled hood. The smoke thickened. Mia's heart shot into her throat. With strength born of panic and purpose, she hooked her arms under the man's shoulders and dragged him backward, away from the car. Come on, she panted, slipping and sliding in the mud. They had just cleared 10 feet when the car exploded behind them with a deafening boom, flames lighting up the mountainside in an eerie orange flash. Debris shot into the air. Heat seared her back. She shielded the man's body with her own. When the ringing in her ears faded, all she could hear was her own ragged breathing and his weak voice. You saved me." "You're not out of the woods yet," she said, chest heaving. "Stay with me, okay?" She ran back to her van, threw open the back, and grabbed the thick picnic blanket she used during breaks. She wrapped it tightly around him, pressing it against the bleeding wound on his head, then helped him into the passenger seat. Mia jumped in behind the wheel, turned the key and whispered, "Please, don't fail me now." The engine coughed, then roared to life. She drove. Down the mountain, through the sheets of rain, hands shaking on the wheel, she drove as fast as she dared. The man, Harold, as he had whispered, drifted in and out of consciousness. She kept talking to him, every mile, every minute. "You're doing great, Harold. Just a little farther. Stay with me." The emergency room sign glowed through the storm like salvation. Mia swerved into the drop-off lane and leaned on the horn until staff rushed out. "Emergency trauma," she shouted. "Male, late 70s, head injury, possible internal bleeding. He was in a wreck." Medical staff surrounded the van, pulling Harold out and loading him onto a stretcher. Mia stepped back, soaked, filthy, bleeding, and trembling. A nurse turned to her. "Are you family?" "No," she said, "just someone who found him." "Name for the report?" She hesitated, then shook her head. "It doesn't matter, just save him." Without waiting for a response, she turned and walked back into the rain. Her van's door groaned shut behind her, and as she drove off, headlights swallowed her silhouette. She didn't look back. She never expected to see him again. She never expected anyone to come looking. Inside the emergency room, nurses rushed Harold through the double doors, calling out vitals. Doctors shouted orders. Mia stood at the edge, soaked and trembling, her clothes clinging to her skin, her bloodied hands shaking from cold and adrenaline. A nurse approached. "Ma'am, we'll need your name for the report." Mia shook her head. "I'm not family." "Even so, just save him," she said, softly but firmly. The nurse hesitated, then nodded. "We'll do everything we can." Mia gave a faint smile and turned away. She walked out quietly past the front desk, back into the rain. Her van waited, steaming in the night. She climbed inside and sat there, forehead resting on the wheel, breathing heavily. Her heart pounded, but a flicker of calm settled in her chest. She had done the right thing. The drive home was silent. Her hand throbbed from the cuts. The crash still burned behind her eyes. She'd clean the wounds later. Right now, she just wanted to disappear. Back at her apartment, the air was damp and cold. She changed into dry clothes, collapsed on her bed and stared at the ceiling. No one would ever know what she had done. No reporters would come. No one at the bakery would ask. She'd show up the next morning like always, quiet Mia, the delivery girl who worked hard, said little, and gave extra donuts to the homeless man on 3rd and Main. She didn't need recognition. She only needed to believe the man had lived. That night she dreamt of fire, of a voice pleading, "Don't let me die here." She woke before dawn, heart heavy, and went to work. By 6, she was at the bakery, sleeves rolled, bandaged hand hidden beneath a glove. No one asked. She said nothing. The world kept turning. That afternoon, she passed the curve where it all happened. The car was gone, the road clean. No smoke, no wreckage, just silence and leaves. Life returned to its rhythm, early mornings, quiet deliveries, long nights. But sometimes, Mia's mind drifted back to him, the man, his panic, his grip, the silent message in his eyes. She hoped he survived. She never returned to the hospital, never called. Some acts, she believed, were meant to live in silence. To Mia, kindness was never for applause, it was a choice, one she made, then walked away from. What she didn't know was that far away, in a high-rise office, someone had begun a search. A man determined to find the girl who disappeared into the storm, with courage in her hands and fire at her back. The first thing Harold Carter saw when he opened his eyes was the sterile white ceiling of a hospital room. The second was the soft blur of an IV line in his arm, and the third a nurse leaning over him, smiling with gentle relief. "You're awake, Mr. Carter," she said kindly. "You're very lucky." He blinked slowly, then struggled to sit up. Pain pulsed in his ribs and down his side. His head throbbed. The last thing he remembered was a blinding light, the smell of smoke, and her. The girl. "Where is she?" he rasped. The nurse looked puzzled. "Who?" "The girl. The one who pulled me out. She was here, young, brown hair. She saved me." The nurse's expression softened. "Sir, no one was with you when you arrived. You were dropped off in the emergency bay and left before we could get her name." Harold closed his eyes, but tears welled up behind the lids. She didn't wait for thanks. "She might have saved your life," the nurse added gently. "No," he murmured. "She saved more than that." 3 days later, Ryan Carter stepped off his private jet and into a cold gray morning. His phone buzzed continuously with emails, meeting reminders, and investor questions, but he ignored them all. He had one purpose. The call from the hospital had been brief but alarming. His grandfather had survived a near-fatal crash. The driver was unknown, but what stuck with him most was the voicemail Harold left him shortly after regaining consciousness. "She pulled me from the fire, Ryan, a stranger. She didn't ask who I was, didn't care about my money, just risked her life. I owe her everything." Harold Carter wasn't the type to dramatize. He was sharp, iron-willed, and rarely emotional, but Ryan could hear it in his voice. Something had shaken him deeply. "You need to find her," Harold had said. "You need to thank her for me. For us." Ryan had never known his grandfather to sound so fragile, or so certain, so he came. He went straight to the hospital. The doctors gave him the rundown. Harold had sustained a concussion, 2 broken ribs, and minor internal bleeding, but was recovering well. The wreck had happened on a remote mountain road, outside a small town 2 hours away. The emergency room staff had tried to trace the woman who brought him in, but she'd left without a name. "No security footage?" Ryan asked, frustrated. The receptionist shook her head. "She came during a rainstorm, late night. Our exterior cameras were damaged last month." "But she drove him here?" he pressed. "There has to be something." "A nurse said she saw a blue delivery van," the receptionist offered. "Old model, dented on the side." It was a start. Ryan spent the next day tracing traffic cameras from nearby roads. With the help of his security team, he reviewed grainy footage until they spotted it, a battered blue van turning into the hospital parking lot. The plate was barely visible, but enough to narrow it down. They traced it to a bakery in a small town. When Ryan walked into the shop that next morning, he didn't expect the smell of fresh bread and cinnamon to hit him like a memory. The place was humble, warm, with old wooden counters and handwritten signs. A bell rang as he entered. Behind the counter, wiping her hands on a flour-dusted apron, stood a young woman with kind eyes and tired shoulders. It took him a moment to recognize her from the blurry footage, but there was no doubt. She looked up, slightly startled by his presence. "Hi, can I help you?" Ryan took a step closer, heart oddly unsteady. "I'm looking for someone," he said carefully. "A woman who drove my grandfather to the hospital after a crash. Late one night, a blue van, the car exploded." Her face paled slightly, lips parting in surprise, but she said nothing. "His name is Harold Carter," he continued. "He nearly died. He said a woman pulled him out, risked her own life and saved his. He's been asking for her ever since." Still no answer, but her eyes flickered with something, recognition perhaps, emotion. "Was it you?" Ryan asked softly. Mia looked down, fidgeting with her apron. "I didn't do it for thanks. I'm not here to offer thanks," he said. "I'm here because my grandfather, who has survived war, loss, and business battles most people couldn't dream of, said that you didn't just save his life, you saved his heart." Mia swallowed hard. "He told me," Ryan continued, voice steady but quiet, "that he hadn't felt that kind of human kindness in years, that you reminded him what really matters, and he wants to see you, not as a debt, not as charity, just as a man who wants to say thank you." Silence filled the bakery, broken only by the hum of an old fridge and the soft buzz of the neon "open" sign in the window. "I didn't even know his name," Mia whispered. "You know it now," Ryan replied, "and he knows yours, matters." It was the beginning of something neither of them could name yet, but both understood. Some rescues leave scars, others plant seeds. Ryan Carter was used to finding answers. In business, in negotiations, in corporate crises, he prided himself on precision and control. But this was different. He was chasing a ghost that his grandfather, the unshakable Harold Carter, had said changed his life, not through money, not through influence, but through an act so selfless, so human, that it had left an indelible mark. "She pulled me from a burning car, Ryan," Harold had said, voice still rasping from injury but layered with awe. "She didn't even ask my name. She just saved me and left." And now Ryan couldn't let that go. Not when he saw the way his grandfather looked at the window and thought, quiet and reflective, something rare and vulnerable flickering behind his eyes. So Ryan worked backward. First, he obtained footage from the hospital's nearby traffic cameras, grainy, outdated. Most of it was ruined by the storm, but one clip, just 2 seconds long, showed a blue van pulling into the emergency entrance. An older model, dented on the left side, no company name, no plate visible. He paused the video, zoomed in on the van's driver through the blurry windshield. A faint outline of a woman's face, young, determined, soaked from the rain. That was enough. He traced every bakery, flour shop, and courier service in the surrounding towns that used a similar vehicle. Most led nowhere. Some vans had been sold, others were still in use but registered to different routes. Finally, a lead came from a small bakery called Sweet Pine in a quiet town just an hour outside the city. "We have a blue van," the owner had told Ryan over the phone. "Belongs to one of our delivery girls. Why?" Ryan didn't answer. He just got in his car and drove. The bakery was small and humble, with ivy climbing up the sides and the smell of cinnamon and warm bread wafting through the air. Inside, wooden tables and soft music gave the place a cozy, worn charm. A bell chimed as he opened the door. Behind the counter stood a woman with her back turned, humming to herself as she wiped flour from her hands. Her braid hung down the back of her apron, and her sleeves were rolled up past her elbows. Something about her stance, the quiet grace in how she moved, struck him. "Mia," the shop owner called from the back room, "can you help the gentleman?" The woman turned, and there she was. Not blurry anymore, not hidden behind smoke and storm. The face from the footage. The face Harold had described in his half-conscious murmurs. Her eyes met Ryan's as she stepped forward, cautious but polite. "Hi, welcome. What can I get for you?" He opened his mouth, but the question felt heavier than he expected. Do you drive the blue van outside?" he asked. She blinked, caught off guard. Yes, for deliveries. Why?" He hesitated again, then stepped closer, lowering his voice just enough that no one else could hear. "Did you pull an elderly man out of a burning car about 2 weeks ago, in the rain, on a mountain road?" She froze. Her hands stilled on the countertop, and her eyes dropped to the floor, her breath caught in her throat. She began, then swallowed. "How do you know about that?" Ryan exhaled. "Because that man is my grandfather, Harold Carter." Mia's head snapped up. "He's alive?" she asked, voice trembling. "Yes, because of you." She stared at him, a storm of emotions flashing behind her eyes. Relief, disbelief, fear, maybe even guilt. "I didn't think he'd make it," she whispered. "He was so hurt. I just did what I had to, and then you left." She looked away. "It wasn't about being seen." Ryan stepped even closer, lowering his voice. "He talks about you every day. He doesn't even know your name. Just calls you the girl who saved my soul." Mia gave a soft, startled laugh. "I think he might be overestimating me." "I think he knows exactly what he's saying," Ryan replied. "And after everything he's seen in his life, I've never heard him speak about someone like this." For a moment, neither of them said anything. Mia looked down at her flour-dusted hands, then back at Ryan. "I wasn't trying to be a hero. I just couldn't drive past and do nothing." Ryan nodded slowly. "And that's exactly why you are one." She looked at him for a long moment, studying him, as if unsure what to make of the man in front of her. He wasn't dressed in designer suits or followed by an entourage, just a man with sincerity in his voice and something raw in his eyes. "You really came all this way to find me?" "I had to," he said simply. "Not because of who I am, but because of what you did." For the first time since she pulled Harold from that burning wreck, Mia felt her heart shift. Not from fear, not from fatigue, but from something warm and deeply unfamiliar. Someone had noticed, and someone had come. Later that afternoon, Ryan returned to the bakery, not with cameras, not with reporters, not even with a gift, just a quiet request. "Would you have dinner with me?" he asked, standing outside Mia's delivery van as she packed the last box for the evening. She looked at him, brows slightly furrowed. "Why?" He shrugged lightly. "Because I'd like to talk. To listen, really." She hesitated. His clothes were simple, but nothing about him was ordinary. She had Googled him the moment he left the bakery earlier that day. Ryan Carter, CEO of Carter Global Holdings, worth hundreds of millions. The kind of man who belonged on magazine covers, not cracked sidewalks beside a girl in a flour-dusted apron. But something in his eyes was genuine, unassuming, so she nodded once. "Okay." They met at a quiet diner across town. Not the kind with pressed linens or crystal glasses, but one with cracked red booths and pie warmers by the register. Mia liked that. She ordered grilled cheese and soup. Ryan got black coffee and a turkey sandwich. They spoke in patches at first, weather, work, then came the deeper currents. "I lost my mom when I was 8, Mia said, tracing her finger along the rim of her glass. "Cancer. My dad didn't last much longer. He left, disappeared. I bounced between foster homes, group shelters, learned to keep my head down and survive. Ryan didn't interrupt. I started working at 15. Dishwashing, deliveries, anything. People were kind sometimes, but mostly it was just me. She glanced at him. That night I found your grandfather. Honestly, I didn't think. I saw someone who needed help, and I couldn't leave him there. Ryan's voice was soft. You didn't just help. You saved him. I don't want money, she said quickly, cutting him off before he could offer it, or recognition. I don't need a scholarship or a new car or whatever people like you usually offer. He raised a hand gently. I wasn't going to offer any of that. Mia blinked. I just wanted to know the person who saved the man who raised me, Ryan said. That's all. For a moment, she didn't know what to say. No one had ever looked at her like that before. Not with admiration, not with quiet gratitude. She had been seen so often as someone temporary, replaceable. But this man saw something more. The next day, Mia was kneading dough when the bell above the bakery door rang. She turned, expecting a customer, and froze. Standing there was Harold Carter. He was thinner than she remembered, pale from recovery, leaning on a cane, but his eyes were bright and wet as they landed on her. I told him I needed to come, Harold said, his voice rough but unwavering. I needed to see your face one more time. Mia wiped her hands on her apron, stunned. You? You're okay? I am, he said. Thanks to you. He stepped forward slowly, and when he reached the counter, he reached for her hand. She took it carefully, overwhelmed by the warmth in his grasp. I don't know your story, Harold said, his voice shaking. But I know what you did for me. You ran into fire for a stranger. I'll never forget that. Tears filled his eyes. I've lived a long life, built companies, lost friends, raised a stubborn grandson. He smiled faintly toward Ryan. But no one's ever saved me like you did. The room had grown quiet. Customers, staff, everyone watched as the powerful Harold Carter blinked back tears in front of a bakery girl. Mia's throat tightened. I didn't do it for this. I didn't expect anything. That's exactly why it matters, Harold whispered. Ryan stepped up beside his grandfather, placing a hand on his shoulder. She's the reason I'm still your grandson today, he said softly, and she deserves to know that she belongs, no matter which world she came from. Mia looked between them, her heart a whirlwind. She had lived so long in the margins of society, convinced that her good deeds would vanish into silence. But today, her kindness echoed, and for the first time, someone had followed that echo all the way back to her. The days that followed were filled with moments Mia never expected. Ryan began showing up at the bakery more often, not in suits or chauffeured cars, but in jeans and rolled-up sleeves. At first, she thought it was coincidence, then politeness. But the way he lingered, asked about her van, and offered to help carry deliveries told her otherwise, and he never made it feel like charity. I noticed your van's front left tire is nearly bald, he said one morning, crouching beside the vehicle as she loaded a tray of muffins. You could easily skid in the rain. I know, Mia muttered, just trying to make it last another week or two. The next day he returned with a replacement, not a new car, not flashy, just a safe, sturdy tire, bought, delivered, and installed by his own hands. I watched a tutorial, he said when she stared at him, baffled. Don't look at me like I'm helpless without a boardroom. And then came the deliveries. He started riding along, claiming it was a break from the corporate circus. But Mia knew better. He listened. To everything. To how she missed her mom when baking apple pies. To how she collected old postcards at thrift stores because she liked imagining lives she'd never lived. To how she still walked the same park path every Sunday afternoon, even if she didn't know why. He never laughed, never dismissed, just listened, with a rare kind of attentiveness that made her feel like the only person in the world. One Thursday morning during a routine delivery downtown, Mia spotted someone huddled beneath a bridge, frail, soaked, shivering. An elderly woman, wrapped in garbage bags, her eyes swollen and skin blotched from the cold. Wait here, Mia told Ryan, already grabbing the extra loaf of bread and a bottle of warm tea from the passenger seat. "Mia," he began, "I'll be quick." She rushed over, knelt down, and offered the food with soft words and gentle hands. The woman flinched at first, then melted into tears. Ryan watched from the van. No cameras, no applause, just raw, quiet humanity. And in that moment, watching Mia crouched beside a stranger in the cold, whispering comfort with the same tenderness she'd given his grandfather, something shifted inside him. He had seen women in heels who demanded attention, women who talked in power moves and practiced smiles, but Mia, she moved through the world with quiet courage, with strength that didn't need to announce itself. Later that evening, as the sun began to dip behind a row of ivy-draped buildings, Ryan and Mia sat on a bench outside the bakery, sipping lukewarm tea from paper cups. "Do you always do that?" he asked. "Do what?" "Help everyone like that," she shrugged. "I know what it's like to feel invisible, to be cold and hungry and afraid." He nodded, silent for a moment. "You make the world softer," he said finally. Mia looked at him, surprised. "You don't just see people," he continued. "You feel them, and somehow you carry their pain without letting it destroy you." She smiled gently. "That's not something most people say." "I'm not most people," Ryan replied, eyes holding hers. "And I don't think you are either." Something warm and unfamiliar pulsed in her chest, and in his. They didn't touch, didn't kiss, didn't need to. Because love sometimes doesn't arrive with fireworks. Sometimes it arrives in silence, between flower-dusted afternoons, in shared glances over paper teacups, and in the unwavering way someone looks at you like you've been seen for the first time in your life. The storm did not arrive with thunder. It came quietly, with a single photo leaked online. Mia stepping out of the bakery, flour on her apron, Ryan beside her, holding the door open. A blurry shot, but enough. Enough to start the rumors, the frenzy, the digital wildfire. Unknown girl who saved billionaire heir's grandfather. From bread to boardrooms, who is she really? Sleeping her way to the top. Within hours, Mia's quiet life unraveled. Reporters camped outside the bakery, pressing cameras against the glass. Paparazzi followed her van on delivery runs, yelling questions she had no answers for. Commenters online tore through her photos, digging into her past, her childhood in the foster system, her long-forgotten high school blog. The headlines turned colder, a tragic past or a convenient one. Innocent angel or calculated climber. She stopped going online, but the bakery staff couldn't help but show her the worst of it, thinking she needed to know. One article even accused her of fabricating the story, claiming Harold Carter had already called emergency services and she was simply the first on the scene. It crushed her. One night, after delivering a tray of scones, she sat in her van in a grocery store parking lot and cried until her chest ached. The kindness she had given freely, now used against her. The peace she had found, shattered. She didn't answer Ryan's calls. She couldn't. Not because she blamed him, but because she couldn't stand the thought of being the reason his name was dragged through tabloids. She wasn't a Carter. She wasn't his kind. And so, she decided to leave. One suitcase. A one-way ticket to a town 3 states away. A note taped to the bakery fridge. "Thank you for everything. Please tell Ryan I'm sorry." But Mia never boarded the bus. Because the next morning her name was on every screen in the country, but this time, not because of a smear campaign. This time it was because Ryan Carter had stopped running. He stood on a press conference stage, alone, in front of dozens of cameras, hundreds of reporters, and millions watching from home. He wore no tie, no armor, just truth. "I've stayed quiet long enough," he said into the microphone, "and I won't let silence protect cruelty anymore." Flashbulbs popped. Reporters leaned in. "Her name is Mia Dawson," Ryan continued. "She saved my grandfather's life when no one else would. She carried him out of a burning car. She risked her own life without ever asking for anything in return. She didn't want money. She didn't want attention." He paused. "And now, Because I happen to care about her, you're treating her like she's committed a crime." There was a collective hush. "I won't let that stand." Cameras clicked. The crowd waited. "She doesn't need to belong to my world," Ryan said, voice firm, eyes sharp. "Because I choose to live in hers." Gasps rippled through the room. "She's not an opportunist," he added. "She's the most selfless, compassionate, real person I've ever met, and I'm proud to love her." For a moment, the world froze. Then came the applause. Not from everyone, but enough to turn the tide. By nightfall, articles had changed tone. Headlines softened. "The billionaire and the baker. Love beyond headlines. Maybe we got her all wrong." And as Mia sat in a motel room miles outside town, her phone rang again. She picked it up with trembling hands. "Why did you do that?" she asked when Ryan's voice came through. "Because love is louder than lies," he said. And for the first time in days, she let herself believe. Maybe it was. The garden behind Harold Carter's countryside home was never meant to host a wedding. It had once been just a patch of green beyond a stone patio, lined with wild ivy and a few crooked rose bushes that bloomed when they pleased. But a year had passed since a girl with flower on her cheeks and fire in her soul walked into their lives. And now, under the soft canopy of twinkling lights and floating paper lanterns, it had become sacred ground. The chairs were mismatched, borrowed from neighbors. The altar was handmade by Harold himself, who insisted on doing it even if his knees protested. And the bride? She wore no designer gown, no veil worth thousands, but a flowing ivory dress she had found in a vintage shop, altered by hand, stitched, with the kind of care that only comes from remembering where you came from. Mia stood beneath the arch, her hair swept back with fresh jasmine woven in. Her hands trembled only slightly as she held the bouquet of wildflowers Ryan had picked himself that morning. He insisted, laughing, "The best flowers aren't delivered in trucks." Ryan stood opposite her, in a light gray suit, simple, timeless. His eyes never left her, and in them was that same awe he had carried the day she pulled his grandfather from a burning wreck. The guests were few, close friends, bakery staff, and a dozen strangers who had since become family through the work Mia and Ryan had built together. Near the front row sat a small girl, no more than 5, her legs swinging beneath her seat, a flower crown slipping over her curls. She clutched a teddy bear and looked up with wide eyes, the picture of wonder. Her name was Elsie. They found her nearly 8 months ago, abandoned, injured, and terrified after a car crash on a remote stretch of road. Mia had visited the hospital as part of her work with their newly launched Roadlight Foundation, an initiative they co-founded to support traffic accident victims in isolated communities. Mia had sat beside the little girl for hours, telling her stories, wiping her tears, and eventually singing her to sleep. The adoption was never planned, but love, Mia had learned, rarely was. Now, as the ceremony began, Elsie squirmed free from her chair and ran toward the altar. Ryan bent down just in time to catch her in his arms. "Daddy," she whispered, clutching his collar. "Are you marrying Mommy now?" He chuckled softly, kissing her forehead. "That's exactly what I'm doing." The crowd laughed gently as he passed her into Mia's arms. For a moment, bride and groom stood there, together, holding the child who had stitched the final thread in the tapestry of their unlikely, extraordinary love. The officiant cleared his throat gently. "Shall we begin?" Their vows were simple. Mia, voice steady despite the tears shimmering in her eyes, said, "You found me when I didn't even know I was worth being found. You saw beyond headlines, beyond fear. You saw me, and you never let me go." Ryan, his voice rough with emotion, replied, "You showed me the kind of strength that isn't built in boardrooms or taught in schools. You loved without needing anything in return, and now I want to spend the rest of my life earning that gift." They kissed as the guests stood, cheering, clapping, even crying. Harold wiped a tear from the corner of his eye, his cane resting beside him. As the couple turned toward the crowd, hand in hand, Elsie skipping between them, Harold leaned toward his sister and whispered, "He found her." She looked over. "Found who?" "My angel," he said. "The one who pulled me from fire, the one who gave my life back meaning. And now, she's his angel too. Later that evening, the backyard glowed in golden light as the sun began to dip below the horizon. Tables were lined with home-cooked food. Guests danced to music from an old speaker. Children chased bubbles. And in the middle of it all, Mia twirled barefoot on the grass, holding Elsie's hands, spinning her in circles. Ryan stood back for a moment, watching them, watching his girls. He thought of how far they had come, from a fiery wreck on a wet mountain road to this evening, where laughter floated on the air like something holy. Mia caught his gaze and walked over, cheeks flushed, breathless from dancing. She placed her head against his chest and whispered, "I never thought this could be my life." He held her tighter. "That's because the world lied to you. It made you think you weren't meant for joy, but you were always worthy of this." From a distance, Harold smiled, raising his glass in their direction. "To Mia," he said softly to himself, "the woman who saved me, then saved him." As twilight deepened and stars began to claim the sky, the Carter garden became something eternal, not through wealth, not through legacy, but through love, born in fire, tested by storms, and chosen again and again in silence, in chaos, and finally, in peace. And there, beneath the old oak tree, the girl who had once vanished into the night without a name was now wife, mother, and co-founder of a mission that reached hearts far beyond the crash that had started it all. Where once there had been smoke and wreckage, now there was light. And where there had once been only survival, now there was family. Thank you for joining us on this deeply moving journey of bravery, compassion, and unexpected love. She drove an old man to the hospital as a favor, not knowing his grandson, a CEO, would come back to find her. Reminds us that the smallest acts of kindness can spark the greatest changes, not just in the lives we touch, but in our own hearts too. From the stormy roadside to a garden full of light, Mia showed us that heroism is often quiet, selfless, and rooted in love. And Ryan proved that when we choose people for who they are, not where they come from, something extraordinary can grow. If this story touched your soul, made you smile, or reminded you of the goodness still left in this world, we invite you to join our growing family of hearts and stories. Subscribe to Soul Stirring Stories for more tales that heal, inspire, and stay with you long after the screen fades to black. Your next favorite story is waiting. Let's walk there together.